go over kind of what we've been doing on the policy and legislative front. It's been quite a busy year, and I want to hit all the high points. How many of you are familiar with or heard of our sponsored bill this year, AB 1437? Show of hands. People heard about it? All right, a lot of you haven't heard about it. So it's a bill that we've sponsored this year. It's like I said, Assembly Bill 1437, authored by Jim Patterson, Republican out of Fresno, and co-authored by Senator Scott Wiener, Democrat from San Francisco. So it's a bipartisan bill. Been enjoying a lot of bipartisan support, and I want to go over what that bill would do if passed. So last year, probably some of you aren't aware of this, but DSS issued an interpretation that said that if you choose to open a facility 5 years after your initial administrator certification, that you would have to, in order to open that facility to get it licensed, you would have to retake your initial certification training program. So what that means is you have to redo the education portion, which is now 80 hours for those of you that did it when it was 40 hours. Now it's 80 hours, and you have to retake the state test. So we've, in this bill, we're basically amending that so that as long as you're keeping current with your continuing education requirements of 40 hours every 2 years, that there'd be no requirement to have to retake your entire initial certification training program just because you wanted to open up another facility. So that's one aspect of the bill. The other aspect of the bill has to do with criminal clearance transfer requests. So if you're a multi-facility operator, you may have experienced a situation where you have an employee that started out at one facility, they had their clearance associated, and then you move them to another facility, but maybe you didn't do the transfer. Or you did the transfer, but DSS claims they didn't get the paperwork or don't have a record of it, and next thing you know, they come and visit your facility, there's no transfer on the record, and you get a citation. Is that something some of you have heard about or experienced? It's been a big problem in our industry, specifically with sick-bed facilities, for a really long time. So what this bill would do, the language of the bill says that if you, as a licensee, if you have an employee that's associated to one of your facilities, they would be able to work without a transfer request at any one of your other facilities within the same licensee. So if you have 2 facilities, 3 facilities, 4 facilities, whatever, if you have an employee that's associated to one of them, they can work everywhere else as long as they're associated to one. So that's, I think, going to be a really big improvement for our industry, because for a long time they've been treating these situations as if we hired someone kind of off the street with no criminal clearance, and we know that that's not really the case. Those situations are apples and oranges, and most of the time when they give the civil penalty for that, it's the maximum of $500. So this bill, if passed, will do away with that, and so we're really excited about the bill. It's had a really good trajectory. It passed the Assembly Human Services Committee unanimously, the Aging and Long-Term Care Committee unanimously, and then it passed the Assembly floor, and then it passed the Senate Human Services Committee unanimously, and now it's just waiting on the Senate floor, and after it passes there, it'll go to the governor's desk. And assuming he signs it, then this would go in effect January 1. So really been busy on that front. But it's not just legislation, we've been busy on other fronts as well, such as admission agreement regulations. The Department of Social Services proposed new regulations regulating our admission agreements, and as you know, many of you know, the last several years there have been increasing amounts of regulation on the admission agreement. And so that's an important area that we've been very busy with. Some of the things that were proposed and that we were able to get rid of, the regulations, is there were proposals that would have required a separate signed and dated document for rate increases. So that's been done away with. Also, they wanted to have all basic service charges listed, even if they were all under a fixed monthly fee. So this would have required us to do a line item breakdown in terms of financials for each line item within a fixed fee. So if you had like a fixed fee of $3,000 a month, you have to break that down of what is that $3,000 a month composed of, which is something we don't do. So that's no longer in play. We don't have to provide an itemized statement of separate charges from third-party providers the facilities work with. And the big thing was they were saying that residents could get a refund with a 5-day notice instead of a 30-day notice. So that was a big one. And that would really kind of hampered us. And we were able to do away with that one as well. So there's a lot of things that we've combated on the admission agreement regulation front. The other area, DSS is reviewing incidental and medical care regulations. And so we've made some proposals on that front. Regarding PRN medication, Six Flags is proposing that nonverbal communication be explicitly recognized as a form of communication. Given that there are residents in our communities that may not be able to communicate verbally, but they can communicate signs and symptoms through nonverbal communication. So just as a matter of, as an example, a physician may prescribe, let's say, Robitussin with specific instruction that is to be given for cough. So we believe, for example, that the act of coughing should be considered a form of nonverbal communication. So we're trying to get that in regulations. We're also proposing that if a resident is unable to communicate his or her symptoms clearly, the facility staff be permitted to assist the resident with self-administration if a licensed nurse has determined the need for the PRN according to the prescriber's order, instead of having to contact the physician prior to each dose of a PRN medication. And finally, for incidental and medical care regulations, we're proposing that 911 only have to be called in response to an apparent life-threatening medical crisis, and that for injuries or other circumstances that have resulted in an imminent threat for a resident's health that is not an apparent life-threatening medical crisis, appropriate medical professionals may be contacted in lieu of contacting 911. So what we're trying to do is reduce unnecessary 911 calls, unnecessary hospitalizations. As you know, more and more services are coming into the home, mobile x-ray, there's home health, you can contact the doctor, you can contact the RN at the home health. There's, 911 shouldn't be necessarily the first thing we do. I mean, if it's appropriate, of course, but we're saying that, all situations aren't created equal, and, with the system the way it is, with these long ER stays, hospitals don't want to admit. We have stories of residents staying in the ER area for over 24 hours and they don't admit them. They're under observation, so the hospitals call it. So we're really trying to reduce unnecessary hospitalizations. And then finally, the Department of Social Services is starting to review dementia care regulations as well. And this is going to be an important area. This review was triggered by the request of CANNER, which is the California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform. And they're actually recommending to DSS that specific staffing ratios be included in dementia care regulations. In addition, they're recommending the development of a uniform resident assessment or appraisal tool that would dictate what those staffing ratios might be. Now, as providers, we know there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to providing dementia care, and there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to the type of appraisals that we may use. So Six Flags is going to, oppose any overly prescriptive and rigid staffing ratios that would unnecessarily increase costs associated with staffing. And another big area that we're combating is what's called private right of actions. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there's been a lot of laws recently that expand the rights of consumers in RCFEs, which we don't have a problem with. But more and more of those laws are being attached now with what's called a private right of action, meaning that if those laws are violated, that it would give the private parties the right to bring a lawsuit. So private right of actions result in more lawsuits against RCFE owners. And so this has been showing up in bills, and it's going to continue to be a battlefront for the coming years, and so we're vigorously opposed to any private right of actions that are found in legislation that expand consumer rights, because we feel like it makes RCFEs targets for lawsuits, and it really puts people out of business rather than focusing on education on what those rights are and corrective actions and things of that sort. So these are some of the major things that we've been working on, and this is what your membership in large part contributes to, is our ability to advocate in Sacramento at the state capitol on a day in and day out presence. With our two lobbyists, we have a presence there every day. I myself go usually at least once a month, to Sacramento to participate in DSS quarterly meetings, to testify before the Senate and the Assembly, Human Services Committees, and to participate in the policy discussions that DSS is having. So Six Beds is in a really unique situation where we actually have a seat at the table and we're being invited to provide our input from a provider's perspective before these things get passed. Because once they're passed, it's hard to undo. So that's the benefit of, before Six Beds, we didn't have the benefit of being at the table. Now we're at the table before things get passed. So, but that's can only be sustained with your continued support and membership. So I thank you for your support, and if you have any questions, come up and talk to me later. But these are some of the stuff we're working on, and I'm so happy to see all of you here today. It's really a packed house, and thank you for your support. Appreciate
So George, that's why, vote, tell us providers, that is why we can no longer remain silent.
No.
We're just gonna have to continue to work on this, protect our industry, and we have some good people in Sacramento. So some of the benefits of becoming a member are what? A voice, a representation in the state capitol. That's very important. You know, after the 2014 RCFE Reform Act, which we killed some, we amended a few of them, we started this organization. You know, having a working good relationship, another advantage with the DSS, Department of Labor, which is a huge thing right now, and it's still going on. Networking, having networking, you know, having this meeting on an annual basis is a good, you know, thing to have. What else is, any other advantage of becoming a member? Knowledge, okay? Yeah, knowledge is power, yes.
And by having a seat, we're able to tell you what's coming down the pipeline in terms of, you know, these dementia care regulations. It hasn't been publicly announced that they're, you know, reviewing the dementia care regs, or even the incidental and medical care regs. This is all from our inside knowledge of being invited to these stakeholder meetings and these processes. So you're getting to know about what's going on long before the decisions are made and finalized. So getting the information, getting it early is a big advantage. So.
And we can't do it without your support. $50 is not much a month, right?
$50 a month.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
It's not, you know, all this advantage, networking, like I said, it's very important. You know, if you're, like I said, if you're dead serious about staying in this business and protecting our clients and our businesses, please join us, support our industry, support our organization, become a member.